Hello and welcome back to Beckler Guitars and Repair. Today we're checking out a 1990s Danelectro 56 U2 in Blue Burst. Let's check it out. So I saw this posted locally and I just really love the color. It's got a really nice kind of a darker cream color with like a blue outline burst, and it looks great. And then when I saw it in person, I couldn't believe how clean it was. This is like a 30-year-old guitar, close to 30 years old, and yeah, it's like it's brand new. These are one of those guitars that someone bought to learn, and then it just kind of sat in the closet for 30 years. But yeah, we're going to bring it back to life. I could tell the strings on it are super rusty. It needs definitely needs a setup and a restring, and the fretboard's looking really dry. But as far as condition goes, it's in great shape. And these are one of the early Korean models of the Danelectros. They're pretty sought after these days. They're great guitars. These lip pickups are really awesome. You can get some really unique sounds out of them. And these are actually made from masonite, which is kind of like an MDF style material. They're semi-hollow. And these ones are made just like the originals. They have the metal bridge with the little piece of rosewood for the saddle. Now, these can be tricky to intonate sometimes, so I guess we'll see how this thing does with intonation. Rosewood fingerboard, acrylic mother of pearl inlay. We've got our aluminum nut, Danelectro Coke bottle headstock. It's bursted throughout the back and the neck and the headstock, so that's pretty cool. It's a bolt-on neck. We've got 5 bolts. These are your pickup height screws. You've got your cavity back here, so we'll open that up and have a look. And the old school Danelectro waffle back machine heads. And yeah, no serial number on these models. I think inside the cavity there's a serial number, if I remembering that correctly. But we'll have to open it up and take a look. Alright, let's go ahead and start getting some specs and see what this thing can do here. Weighing in at a very light 6 pounds, 3.2 ounces. And here's our pickup readings. In the bridge it's reading a 3.54, and in the neck a 3.48, and in the middle a 7.02. So in the middle it combines them kind of like a humbucker. So you can get more of humbucking tones in the middle position, so that it's reading a 7.02. These knobs are pretty cool too. So the bottom does volume and the top does tone. So it's kind of a two-stage knob. Pretty neat. Width at the nut is a very thin 1.62, and at the 12th fret that beefs up to a 2.0. Neck depth at the 1st fret is a 0.85, and at the 12th fret a 0.898. So here's a look at our neck profile. It's a pretty standard C, and it stays pretty rounded all throughout, and it feels not too chunky, not too thin, kind of in the middle between like a 50s and a 60s neck, and it's definitely nice and rounded. Alright, before I take this thing fully apart, this style of neck you can only adjust once you remove the neck. So the truss rod's actually in this part here that you need to remove the neck off of the guitar in order to adjust it. And what I did notice is that this truss rod is set a little too loose, so there's quite a bit of relief in this neck. So using my not straight edge here, let me just see if I can get a good look here. So you can see that there's quite a bit of a gap between the not straight edge and the fingerboard, so a little bit more than I would like. So the problem with that is the only way to take off the or to adjust the truss rod is to take off the neck. So then there's going to be no spring tension on the neck, and that will adjust how much this is reading as far as relief goes in the neck. So basically what you have to do is kind of measure what the difference is here. So here I'm at about 1/8 of an inch in terms of space between the notch straight edge and the fingerboard, and then I'm going to measure it when the strings are off, and then I'm going to kind of split the difference when I'm adjusting the truss rod. So now I have the strings off, and I'll take a measurement here. And yeah, so it's a lot flatter now because there's no string tension there. So I want to make sure that I'm tightening the truss rod almost till there's no gap at all. And that should be a pretty happy medium between those two measurements. Alright, no serial in the neck pocket or anything. The only thing we have is the number 3. And likewise on the neck, nothing on the neck, but they bursted the neck too, which is kind of crazy. Alright, so I'm going to adjust the truss rod here and then take a measurement with my notch straight edge. So I'm just going to tighten it about a little bit, about half a turn, and then I'll measure on the notch straight edge and see where I'm at. I'm going to try to get this as flush as possible. Right now. So right now we can see that, yeah, there is no gap hardly at all. Very, very slight. I'm just going to give it another like 1/8 of a turn, and that should be good. I won't be able to tell until I get the strings back on if I went too far or not enough, but that's a good way to kind of see where it should be before you put the strings back on. Now when the strings are back on, you can, it's a little tricky, but you are able to remove the neck with the strings on. Then you can do a quick adjustment and fine tune that and put it back in and check it, and do that as many times as you need to get it just dialed in the way you want. They did a nice job in this neck pocket too. It's very, very tight, and there's no shims or anything in there. And yeah, it's so tight you can pretty much lift the guitar without any screws at all. So yeah, that's a very nice tight pocket. You can't do that on many Fenders. So yeah, some of these Danelectro models are Masonite, but this one is definitely plywood. I think they kind of swap between those two materials. But you can see in the neck, when I had the neck off, you can see that multi kind of layered plywood material. And the same is true when you look in the body here. You can see the center block has that plywood, as well as the sides here. You can see that's plywood too. The top actually could be Masonite, and then the sides are plywood. I'm not really sure how they do that, but here's a look at our pickups. So these are the lipstick style pickups. Basically, it's a wound single coil in this metal tube here, and then that's mounted using these little brackets, and then a piece of foam is there to provide tension to the pickup so you can adjust the height. So that's pretty cool. And then those are held into place from screws from the back. You've got really long screws that go through the back, and then those connect to the pickups. And whether you tighten or loosen those screws, that will raise or lower your pickups. The bridge is pretty interesting as well. It's just a chunk of metal with a piece of rosewood on it and 3 screws. And there's some notches in the back for where you put your strings. Like super minimalist and kind of an ingenious design. This whole guitar is kind of built out of super simple parts and materials, but put together in a really clever way. And everybody swears by these Danelectros. They sound great, they play great, they look really cool, and yeah, there's just not much to them, but pretty genius the way that they were manufactured. Alright, after removing this back cavity, which is just a big piece of plastic with a screw that connects to this little bracket here that holds the pickups, or the potentiometers, it's clear. So the back, or the top and the back, are made out of this Masonite material, which if you look at, kind of looks like drywall or MDF. It's similar material. And then the back and the sides and the center block are all plywood. So that's pretty interesting. Here we have our stacked potentiometers. They're full-size pots, and one tone, one volume. And there's our 3-way pickup selector. I noticed this selector is very loose, and it's pretty much just coming apart here. So that likely I'm going to have to replace this part. I'm going to try very carefully to put it back together. There's 2 little tabs on the side that kind of hold everything in place, but it looks like one of those tabs might be broken. I might have to replace that switch, but that's fine. I do have an import style 3-way switch, very similar to this one, and it won't take very long to replace. But yeah, other than that, you can see it's fully hollow. So it's got a center block here where the pickups mount, and then it's fully hollow everywhere else with the masonite top and bottom. So yeah, pretty interesting. Alright, so it was a pretty easy fix. I just had to adjust the housing a little bit, reassemble it back together, and then push those tabs down a little harder. And I just tested it out with an amplifier, and it's working fine now, so no problem. Alright, here's a look at our headstock in really nice shape. No scratches or dings. I'm going to go over the condition on this once I clean it up a little bit. But here's a look at our fingerboard. Nice streaky rosewood, pretty light in color, but no fret wear to speak of. A little dull on the frets, so I'm going to go ahead and throw this in the polisher, and then I'm going to rehydrate the fingerboard because it looks a little dry. Clean it up. Let's do that now. Alright, here it is after the fret buff and the cleaning and rehydration of the fingerboard with some lemon oil. So yeah, super clean, very shiny frets, and the fingerboard looks really nice. It's nice and streaky. I also gave this guitar a nice cleanup, so it's in really nice shape. The only thing I can find on the whole thing is a tiny little mark right there. And the rest of the guitar is like new, super clean. And I guess one little area where the wrap around the body has a tiny little tear in there. But other than that, it's looking pretty brand new, which is quite the feat considering it's an almost 30-year-old guitar. Still got the plastic on the cavity cover in the back, and no marks or dings anywhere other than that one spot on the headstock. There's a look at our Danelectro waffle back tuners. Alright, cool. So we'll put the bridge back where it needs to go. So I'm going to go ahead and get this thing restrung and set up, and we'll see what kind of a setup we can get on here. Alright, I was able to get quite a nice setup on this guitar. So we look with our notch straight edge. We can see that the neck is basically super straight. There's just a tiny bit of relief in the neck. If you see that little tiny line between the notch straight edge and the fingerboard, that means our truss rod is set nice and tight. And then over here by the 3rd fret, when I use the 3rd fret, you can see that the strings are just resting very nicely against that 1st fret. So that means our truss rod is quite straight and our nut is cut quite nicely, so we've got good action there. And then at the 12th fret, we can see at the 12th fret low E, our action is set at just about a 1.5, a little lower. And at the high E, it's just set at 1 millimeter. So yeah, nice low action. I also wanted to mention that the fretboard has no fret sprout at all, and it's nice and smooth with nothing snagging there. And these guitars are a little bit different than a Fender or a Gibson. They have a 14-inch radius, so a little bit flatter. They've also got 21 frets instead of 22 frets, and the scale length is 25 inches. So right in between a Gibson and a Fender. Alright, I like to speed up this part, but if you want to slow it down and see it in real time, just play it back at 25% speed or 0.25. Alright, so yeah, it's a little hard to reach up to these higher frets, but it is possible, but it's definitely not very comfortable. But yeah, no fretting out anywhere, and action's nice and low. And yeah, the neck feels really nice. No fret sprout at all, and the fingerboard edges are slightly rolled. So yeah, it feels good. Okay, let's go ahead and plug it in and see how it sounds. Alright, today we're going to be switching it up a little bit. I'm going to be using my 1957 Silvertone 1391 amplifier. It's a little combo amp. It's 5 watts with an 8-inch speaker. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty clean though. There's not a lot of room for breakups, so I'm going to be using a little overdrive pedal as well. But I'm not going to be using any of the gain on the overdrive pedal. I'm just going to be using the volume just to boost the natural overdrive of the amp. So yeah, let's go ahead and try that out. Alright, I'm just going to be running through the tones. The amp is absolutely dimed, and it's a pretty quiet amp, not a lot of overdrive, so it's very clean sounding. And then I'm just going to run through the bridge and the neck and the middle positions. The middle position is kind of like a humbucker, just a reminder. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so yeah, this thing sounds really, really great clean. One thing I find about this amplifier is it's super dynamic. Like every guitar I plug in sounds differently through it, so you really hear the natural voice of the guitar really well through this thing. That combined where it's like kind of a 50s style amp and this is kind of a 50s style instrument, they sound really, really good together. So this amp doesn't have any overdrive, so I'm just going to use an overdrive pedal, but I'm not going to use any gain. I'm just going to boost the volume so we get a natural overdrive of the amp. So let's go ahead and do that and see how it sounds. Alright, final thoughts on the 1990s Danelectro 56U2 Blueburst. This is living proof that you don't need fancy materials or tone woods or anything like that to have a great guitar. This thing's made out of drywall and plywood, and it sounds great. Now, there are some nice appointments on there. They've got really nice pickups. Danelectro pickups are, you know, world famous. They're great sounding bell-like pickups. They don't really sound like anything else, and they sound amazing. And it's got a really nice piece of rosewood on here, nice and thick too. And it's got a, you know, solid wood neck as well. But yeah, they really didn't spend any money where it didn't need spending for this style of guitar, and they just focused on all the good spots. Like this thing has excellent fretwork. It plays nice and low with no buzzing or fretting out. It's got a really nice aluminum, very well cut nut. The bridge is super simple but awesome. It works great. Super simple. It's just a piece of metal with a piece of rosewood on there, and yet this guitar is intonated really, really well, almost perfectly. And yeah, just a joy to play. Super light, 6 pounds, and yeah, these are just great. I really love the color too. It's kind of an Antigua. What Fender would call an Antigua burst. Prices on Danelectros have gone up a little bit, but they're still quite attainable and affordable. And I was really blown away by this condition this one's in. It's almost 30 years old and it looks brand new. Hardly a mark on it. I think I only found one little spot on the neck here by the tuner. One tiny little chip. And then we buffed the frets so they super smooth and easy to bend on them. And yeah, just a really nice guitar. I really like the stack pots with the tone and the volume. And yeah, everything worked really well on it, and it sounded really good. Alright, that's all I have for you. Thanks for tuning in to Beckler Guitars and Repair, and I'll have more for you really soon. If you're interested in this guitar, I'm going to have it up on the Reverb page, so you can take a look. Alright, thanks a lot. Bye.